Daily Detroit would not be possible without the support of you, our members, and underwriters like Plum Health Direct Primary Care. Plum Health is your personal doctor on speed dial. For just $75 a month, you get unlimited access to your doctor. Just call, text, or visit for anything you need. Up to 90% savings on meds, labs, and imaging services, and 90% of all of your healthcare needs are handled in-house. You get a personal one-on-one relationship with your doctor with unlimited visits. Spend as much time as you need to get your health on the right track. Serving Detroit and Oakland County individuals and businesses. You could sign up at plumhealthdpc.com. That's plumhealthdpc.com. Hey everyone, and welcome to your Daily Detroit. It is a beautiful fall day, Wednesday, October 18th, 2023, coming to you from Detroit's beautiful and historic North End. I am Jer Stays. Across the table from me is
Norris Howard.
Good to see you, sir.
Yes, good to see you as well. And I just want to say this. I want to issue I told you so to Fletcher Sharp because we talked about DCFC and if they were making the playoffs. And I said I had more faith. It was possible. All they had to do was get a draw. I broke down the exact scenario that happened is that they would get the points they needed, they would get a draw against Pittsburgh, and they would make the playoffs, and he was being a Debbie Downer. And so I'm happy DCFC in the playoffs. We're getting knocked out in the first round, but that doesn't matter. We made it to the big dance, y'all.
Yeah, game on Saturday, ESPN Plus.
Yeah, very exciting, very exciting. Looking forward to it. Hopefully we can get a dub. I'm not sure if we will, but I think it's a great way to end the Trevor James era with a playoff berth, which means, hey, you know, the second flight in USL, both seasons, both got into the playoffs.
I can't argue that. We've got a lot to talk about today, man. There are some interesting stories that I think bring up some other interesting questions around Metro Detroit. And I think we're going to start on Belle Isle.
Okay.
Because that's one of Metro Detroit's and the city of Detroit's like favorite spots. It's very beloved, and there's a lot of different issues at play. The current one is word that there might be a demolition of the Belle Isle Boathouse. I think it was opened up in the early part of the 1900s. I want to say 1902 off the top of my head. The DNR, Michigan's Department of Natural Resources, controls the state park, and they're saying that it would cost $54 million to rehab this historic structure. Other engineers have put the number more in 16, specifically mentioned by something from historicdetroit.org, friend of the show. Obviously, there's a gap there. That needs to be reconciled by experts, but it has really gotten some people up in arms about a demolition. Now, I will say that the boat club left officially that place in the mid-90s. It's been some rowing folks, I think Friends of the Belle Isle Rowing, there's been some other events over the years. This is not the yacht club. The boat club is the smaller one near the bridge. The yacht club is fine. That has a bunch of members over there. This has really gotten people upset. I have very mixed feelings about it because I do love preservation. I do love saving these places, but I also worry that this is one of those buildings, like on a previous show with you, Norris, I was like, we're hitting this wall where there's going to be a bunch of things that end up coming down because time's run out. I worry that there won't be the funds to fix this, but I also have some ideas where those funds can come from because, let's be honest, the state doesn't really have that much money. There is no real endowment for Belle Isle of any significance, and the city didn't have money and didn't take care of it during the times it controlled it either.
Yeah, and listen, I think the majority of the responsibility of why the boat club has become so derelict, it does fall at the feet of the city, 1,000%. I don't want to ignore that fact. But I'm going to just straight up say it. Knock it down. Knock it down. And I'm not saying I don't care about preservation. I'm not saying that I don't think some of these fantastically built buildings are not worth saving, but it seems like every time we get to one of these types of buildings, and again, also, it's just because you see it all the time. If this was, in my opinion, some building that, former Mason Hall tucked somewhere in northeast of Detroit.
I think of the Slovak Hall, actually, that's over on the east side. I want to say, I don't know if it's Strong Street or something like that, but anyway, over there.
You don't have the same fervor, right? I think because it's right there by the bridge and people see it all the time, they think that somehow it's worth saving. Ultimately, it's not going to be cost effective to save this building. And I think if we can knock that down, put something there that actually is worth something, or I don't know, maybe even just make Belle Isle even bigger and let that land be usable, because right now it's not, I would prefer that. And I think we have to sort of in this city get out of the concept that the old has to be preserved for the new. In some cases, the old got to get out the way and we got to make something new, flat out. I don't know if we're going to be able to put something in there that's going to be cost effective, that's going to get people to come and actually use that building in enough frequency or enough volume to justify putting that much money into it. If we're talking about between $16 and $50 million, like, come on.
See, I just disagree with you. I think that there needs to be another path because these kinds of things, we're losing more and more of these over every single basically week in this city right now, whether it's the church behind the DSO, those other things, we will never get them back. I'm, number one, a fan of preservation. Number two, adaptive reuse, or if not, reconstruction of reusing that materials in a different building. I think this is a sign of a bigger problem. I understand your point of tax dollars, $16 to $54 million. I hear you. I don't think the state should pay for it. I think that that should be put into private hands.
Okay.
I think that that should be an amazing venue of some sort in the private sector, expecting the government when there's no endowment. I've covered Belle Isle for a number of years now, and I've gone to Belle Isle for many, many years. Belle Isle is at a strategic disadvantage when you compare it to, say, people get really excited because, you know, there is some design shared. It's not the same plan because actually the guy who did Central Park got real mad at the city for not listening to his plan. There are similarities in size to Central Park. There's similarities in size to other parks around the nation. Couple of problems. One, it's not right downtown.
Nope.
Two, there is no endowment. And that has been a failure of city leadership from back in the day. Like, I'm real mixed. Like, I understand the feelings that the city held on to the thing and you didn't want to lose control, but the city did not properly take care of it and did not raise money for an endowment so that it doesn't come out of the city coffers. And so with the fact being, there is no endowment, there will be no endowment of size. Go look up Central Park's endowment. Go look up endowments for parks in other cities. We have to think creatively, and we need to open up with guidelines entrepreneurship on Belle Isle. That would be an amazing restaurant. That would be an amazing Airbnb. You build up some things that match the structure. It's not going to be a boat club anymore, but it could be so many other things. And we need to open up that discussion, and we need to have open minds to it because we're not ever going to have the money to fix Belle Isle unless we do that.
I agree that we could potentially be creative and think about more business on Belle Isle. As a matter of fact, I'll just concede that point. We agree there should be more business on Belle Isle. End point, period, full stop. But I think when it comes to this particular building, first of all, you would have to, if you're going to turn it into something new, like a restaurant or something like that, then you got to provide additional parking. So now you're taking away more green space from an island that needs more green space. I
think you could contain it in a lot of the site that they have now. And I think some of the ways that they've been deploying parking along that strip, there's a lot more space that could be used for that, where you're not sacrificing a lot of space right next to it. I think that there's changes that could be made because that area isn't utilized now.
No, it's not utilized. But when I think about I think about like the Toronto Islands, which I just visited not too long ago, right? Which, by the way, it has some similarities to like Mackinac. No motor vehicles are allowed on the island, so on and so forth. They have a whole like little theme park and stuff on there in the same vein that we used to have the zoo and all that kind of stuff, right? But the thing is that there's a ferry from downtown that goes straight to the Toronto Islands. And so I think if we start even thinking creatively about the use of the island itself, because to me, a restaurant makes sense, but not in the current way that we use the island. In the current way that we use the island, if you make this sort of a destination, you will have to rethink how people are moving on that island. You have to rethink how those lanes are made because that building sits right next to the outlet of getting people off the island.
I don't disagree with you, and that's kind of why I like some of the ideas of two-way traffic and spots. Or you could redo some roads. There are things you could do. I don't disagree with you.
I think there needs to be less roads on Belle Isle in general, just period.
Unpopular opinion, I agree with you. Because like when I go to the island, I think it's really important to embrace the things that are unique. It is an oasis in the city. When you put cars everywhere across it, you remove that oasis. Now, I'm very sensitive to the historic uses of the island of barbecues, family picnics, all that other stuff. Sure. But there's ways to manage that traffic. There's ways to do like a dedicated real Disney style shuttle or something where you just get in, there's maybe one or two lots and a road connecting them, and that's it.
Yeah,
right? Like
you have two
tame it,
lots.
tame it.
Yeah, you have two lots, one at the east end, one at the west end, and you have a shuttle that just goes around the whole island. All right, we came in, we parked, we hop on the shuttle with our little barbecue stuff, and then we get to our shed and we have our barbecue.
You could fit a lot more people too.
Yes, a ton more people. And so for me, I think a restaurant or something like that doesn't necessarily have the chance to succeed because currently that's not the thought process of how the island is used. I think if you get it to a point to where tourists, right? Because right now, Belle Isle is not an easy place for tourists to get to. And so if you're trying to put something like that, whether it be a food hall or some shishi restaurant or something like
Or
that.
a combination of all.
Or a combination of all, you need a good way for tourists to be able to get to the island, and we don't have that right now. And even if we did have a ferry and we had something to get them to the island, the walking paths are not made properly for them to get to that location. The whole use of Belle Isle has to be rethought in order for something like that, in my opinion, to be the most successful. And now we're just adding even more dollars on top of dollars that the state ain't got. If you're talking about private investment, sure. But then the public sector still has to come alongside and redo the infrastructure of Belle Isle in order to facilitate this one building. And I don't think they're going to do it.
That's the thing, though. It doesn't need to be about this one building. I think it needs to be a rethink and willing to embrace some change, because how we were is not going to work for the future.
I agree.
You know, when I visited, people yelled at me to go to Buckingham Fountain in Chicago. So I did.
Mm-hmm.
It's right there.
Yeah.
Like, it's right there.
Yeah.
Like, there is a little bit of a walk you have to do.
But you can walk to it.
Yeah, it's a lot more integrated. And with a ferry, I'm glad to hear about the expansion of the Riverwalk that's opening up this weekend, which is really exciting. And that's a start. That's a start, but it's not the answer for the tourist side.
Put a boat there. City of Detroit. Listen to me.
The Port Authority?
Yes. Detroit Port Authority. Hear my plea, okay? Have a boat that goes from the south end of the Riverwalk, where you are building this brand new, beautiful, site with all this stuff. Have a dock right there, a dock at Hart Plaza, and a dock at Belle Isle. Easy. Easy. You have 4 boats. That's all you got to do. And guess what? For 4 months out of the year, you don't even have to run the boats because it's too cold. It's so simple. I don't know why we don't do this. Like, please, Detroit, hear me, because if you do that, all the stuff that Jared's talking about when it comes to the use of this building and putting more business and putting more restaurants and all that stuff on Belle Isle, that one thing will make it 1,000 times easier to do.
And I'm not saying get rid of keep the nature areas. You can corral that and
Absolutely.
say, we're going to do a certain thing over where that giant parking lot
Absolutely.
is. That giant lot that is just already...
Keep the golf course. Keep all that stuff. Keep the giant slide. I'm not saying get rid of anything but roads.
We'll turn it into a top. I love Belle Isle in my heart, but I know from travel it's not an A destination. Let's make it an A destination for residents. Because when I talk to regional listeners, they're like, I love Belle Isle, but I have to have a lot of intention to go there because it's kind of hard to get to.
I lived in Lafayette Park for a number of years, and I can count on my hand how many times we ended up at Belle Isle because you have to be so intentional. It was a 5-minute drive for us, but you have to be so intentional. You have to deliberately say, we're going to the island. Only one time can I remember where it was just like, oh, it's a nice day out. Let's just la-di-da down to Belle Isle, because it is such a pain to get on and off. And then beyond that, what do you even really do? If you're not having a family reunion or a barbecue, if you're not there to take some really cool nature photos.
I mean, there's a conservancy, which is current.
In the conservancy.
Like that
cool.
Dawson, that little area over there.
Yep, and all that is cool. And if you don't have kids, why are you on the island?
Well, imagine a rock climbing wall.
That's what I'm saying.
Imagine zip lines. Like, it's the one idea Kwame Kilpatrick was right on. He wanted zip lines on Belle Isle. That's the one idea I'll give him credit for.
Let me say this. There's a ton of creative things you could do with Belle Isle at very little to no cost. Almost no landscaping would have to be done because there's so much green space and availability for those things to be done. And then I think if you create a ferry, you create less accommodations, you reduce the car traffic on there, maybe what you're talking about with the boathouse becomes more of a reality, becomes more of a feasible thing to do. I just think as it stands right now, to bring the conversation full circle, as it stands right now, I'm not sure what the incentive is for anybody to actually do this with any sort of actual commitment, because I don't think the appetite is there.
Shifting gears to a more statewide and regional focus, the Center for Local, State, and Urban Policy over at the University of Michigan, has a report out recently. I know that MLive did a report on it, thanks to a listener for tagging me in some comments around it, talking about the fact that local government leaders are very worried over housing shortages across Michigan. This is in Metro Detroit. This is in the UP. This is everywhere. Statewide, 41% of Michigan officials say that there's a shortage of single-family housing options in their community. That is up from 23% that said the same thing in 2017. So again, I think we've got another issue where we've got some pre-pandemic, post-pandemic kind of issues. 46% say they have too little multifamily housing, and that is up from 30% 6 years ago. I'll link to the whole thing. There's a lot of interesting tidbits in here, but I think it's interesting that we both have not enough people, which we had Ned Stabler from Tacktown, many other people on. Two things are true here. We both have not enough people, plus not enough housing, and we're jammed up.
Yeah,
Norris.
Because you can't get more people if those people can't go anywhere. The only place we're seeing alleviation of this is in, places like downtown Detroit, in certain spots in Ann Arbor and, Grand Rapids and
Ferndale's building a little bit more multifamily
and all these things. But the issue here, and a lot of Michiganders don't want to hear this, but the issue is NIMBYism. There's a lot of people who don't want apartment buildings that close to them. I don't know why, but a lot of people don't feel that way. And, when you look at some of these medium-sized cities, you look at the Berkeleys and the Sterling Heights and the Livonias and all these types of places where there is no more space to build any more neighborhoods. No more cul-de-sacs can go in these places. You got to be creative, and you got to think, all right, we have a commercial sector here that's being underutilized. We have a skyscraper park here, or, skyscraper for the suburbs. 60% of the tenants are gone. Knock that crap down and make an apartment building.
I actually saw an interesting reuse downriver where they're taking an old bank building and they're just turning into straight up apartments. Real interesting. Although it's weird to see that tower there. I think it's right off of 75 or whatever. It's weird to see that tower downriver. I'm thankful for the use. You're seeing some of that stuff in Wyandotte too.
Yeah, and you're seeing it in places like Southfield as well, where I believe there's a couple of old office buildings over there on Evergreen right across from the Civic Center that they've turned into apartments as well. When we're talking about Metro Detroit, and we're talking about specifically the suburbs, because there's plenty of places to build crap in the city proper, right?
The city's problem with building, and there are a few more single-family housing starts, but that's a somewhat of a separate issue.
Yeah.
And and I've talked to a number of people who've actually built their own homes. It's really challenging. We need to get some red tape removed in the city in order to do some of that stuff on a smaller scale. That's why I'm bifurcating this. I'm not doing this to be like separate. There's some separate issues here.
Yeah. The city proper has different issues, but again, there's not as much of an issue about building apartment buildings or living in an apartment just in any sort of urban center in general. Generally, that's not a city problem, right? This is very much so a suburb problem.
And across the state.
A suburb and elsewhere problem. I would love to hear from the listeners about why they think that apartment buildings aren't being built in your towns. Because for me, I look at where I'm at, I can maybe count on my hand how many actual apartment complexes there are. There's a lot of those little townhome apartment places and a lot of those kinds of things, but not a lot of apartments.
I'm going to stand up for my favorite kind of housing that almost doesn't exist here. I'm going to stand up for the 2-family or the 3-family duplex or triplex.
Bring it back. The 2-family flat is dope.
It's annoying how difficult it is to buy one because you need like 20% down because they consider it more of a weird, different kind of property. But my dream is a 2-family duplex. I want the porch up top because, I own it, so I want the foot noise downstairs.
Yeah.
But like you get a little bit of yard for your dog. It's a great way to build wealth. We need to zone for stuff like that. And a duplex or a triplex creates an amount of middle-level density that I think is far more tolerable to a lot of people than, say, the big apartment complex, which means I'm also not against the apartment complex when properly sited. But that's the kind of density that could really do things and build wealth for residents.
Yes, and that's the thing is that also, by the way, you could build a 2-family flat and make it still look like it has character and make it look historical and match a lot of these neighborhoods, because if you go out like Gratiot and Van Dyke area, if you go through that neighborhood over there, there's a lot of 2-family flats.
Or you'll see the remnants of them in various parts of the city, and you think how dense this city was because you had 2 or 3 families on one plot of land. It may not be as dense as Brooklyn or something. It doesn't need to be.
Right.
But that's where all that like energy and all those businesses that you see, those were made possible not just by single family homes, but by having those 2 or 3 family flats.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I think when we're talking about, you know, the rest of the state and outside of the cities, I want everybody to put the microscope on themselves and really look and say, are we making it easy for people to live here in the state of Michigan? Are we making it easy for folks to want to raise their children here? And I think it's a question, obviously, that every state asks itself, but particularly in the state of Michigan, people always talking about we're a climate haven and we got this wonderful water system and all this other stuff. All true and all very great benefits, wonderful, beautiful nature and all this cool stuff. But are we making it easy for people to move from Springfield, Illinois to Detroit as opposed to Chicago? Are we making it easier for somebody to move from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania to Detroit? That's how we got to look at it. And you got to have that sort of, I don't want to call it transitional housing, but you got to have that kind of stuff. You got to have the flats. You got to have apartments for people to live with so they can begin looking for permanent homes and single family homes.
Supply is important in this whole question. And although still Metro Detroit is lower than other regions as far as cost, when you compare it to what people are making, and when I talk to people out there, like the survey says this in a general sense, but when I talk to individuals from downtown to Dearborn to Auburn Hills, people are feeling squeezed because they're not making as much comparatively with inflation, everything else. They're feeling a real squeeze. A good number of people in this report actually were talking about being cost burdened.
Yeah, which means they're paying over 30% of their income towards housing. And the thing is, the landlords and the apartment owners and all that stuff and the property managers can do that because they know that housing is at a premium in this state. So if you have more and you have more competition and you have, it's not the end of the world if a building has 4 vacancies. You're not dying, okay? But if you have the ability for people to be able to have choices, to be able to say, I want to live in this neighborhood and there's this many availabilities, so on and so forth, then you create an environment in which people feel more comfortable with coming to live in your city as opposed to feeling forced that they gotta live downtown because it's the only place that has availability, or they gotta live in this certain neighborhood because it's the only place that has the kind of house that you want. I don't understand this. I hope that as a state, we can continue to figure it out. I feel like it's very frustrating for a state like Michigan that is one of the more affordable, quote unquote, big states in the union, that we have a shortage on housing. It's really weird and it doesn't help people move here.
Final thing, hot take. I need a hot take from you.
Sure.
On the social media, somebody named Detroit's Builder, he2real_, has a post of 31.4 million views. Normally, I don't do this kind of content, but it's about pink and green Detroit bathrooms. This man, 31.4 million views. He converted a place that was a green and black bathroom from back in the day into one of those white, and I'll link to it, kind of one of those white pristine bathrooms. Are you team pink, green, both pink and green bathroom, or are you team new bathroom?
I'm team new bathroom all the way. I grew up with the pink and green bathroom. I get it. It's wonderful. What a fantastic relic of the post-war construction boom. But if I can never look at that tile, if I can never see it again, I'll be happy. Sometimes you get the little black trim across the. Oh. If I can never see it again, I'm happy. I'm happy.
I want 2 bathrooms in my place, and I want one of them to be pink.
Oh my God!
I want the main to be done up, but I want to keep, because those older pink ones are always small.
They are. Small.
They're all small, so that's fine for your second bathroom in my mind. First bathroom, look, if I want to have any guests over ever in my life, I know that for the most part, every pink bathroom I've been in, people have revolted at me about. Maybe I've just been around the wrong people, but I would save it if it's the half bath or the second bathroom.
It's cool. I love it. It's a relic. I'm glad that people appreciate it, but we must not become victims of our own nostalgia. If this is your thing, more power to you. But if you're asking me, nah, man, I want my stuff brand new.
Yell at us, 313-789-3211. That's 313-789-3211, or dailydetroit@gmail.com. We talked about Belle Isle, the boathouse, housing issues, and of course, Are you saving your pink bathroom? Want to hear from you. With that, I am Jer Stays.
And I'm Norris Howard.
Thank you so much for listening. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.